Bulavanaka, everybody, and welcome back to my podcast, Digressions of a Fijian. I'm your host, Isabella, and it's so great to have you back. Over the last few days, I've been having conversations between friends and colleagues of mine about the possibility of creating or setting up a network of human resources, you could say, within our Fijian community here in the UK, who come from different professional backgrounds, whether it be what would be considered a white-collar industry or trade skills, as a way to bring together our collective expertise to find solutions for recurring issues that we have within our community. For example, housing, resettlement issues, jobs, even visas, which is like one of the major issues that we tend to face as a community. Or we could also use this pool of human resources that we bring together as a way to assist in realizing or conceptualizing our startup plans, startup businesses or aspirations that we have. So in today's episode, I'm going to be talking to someone who does exactly this and has just recently become the director of operations. So I hope you enjoy this episode and sit back and enjoy. Welcome back, everybody. And as I'd mentioned earlier, I have a guest with me for today's episode. Now, our guest today is Salanieta Tamanikaiwaimaro, who is an international lawyer and is also the Director of Operations of Credo Global. Credo Global is a UK-based think tank, which is part of a UK charity called New Sight International. The think tank was recently launched at Astral Center in Berlin, and without going too much into it, I'll let Sala introduce herself and tell you more about her journey into coming in as the Director Operations of Credo Global, and also just about her faith and how it has done amazing things for herself. Welcome, Sala.
Thank you. Thank you, Bella. It's a privilege to be here. Hi, everybody. I hope you're having a good day, whatever you're doing, and that everything's going well with you, with your families, with your work, or if you're at home, or with your children. So my name is Salanieta Tamanikaiwaimaro, as Bella mentioned, but I prefer to be called Sala. So if you see me on the streets, just come say hello. And so that's the Sala that you see in public, but the Sala that most people don't see is one whose faith is rooted in God. And without sounding religious, I just want to say that if I were to choose to be defined by something, it would be that I'm a daughter of the Most High God, and it is knowing Him as my Father, as my Abba Father, that gives me strength, especially in times of crisis, or in times of joy, in times of jubilation, in times of sorrow. For instance, most people don't know this, but I recently finished 13 bouts of very harsh chemotherapy treatment, which I was able to go through the strength and the grace that God provided, and through the support of my family, and particularly my church community. And I'm very grateful to God for that. And it's a privilege to be here. So Credo Global it started with a word that came from God, because it was our leader in our community had a vision, and he saw an image, and he approached Rebecca Crosby, who's the current managing director of Credo Global, and myself, and that's when we started putting shapes on paper. And and we took it back to him, and he said, yes, that sounds right. And we were sent into it, and we got launched in Berlin, as Bella mentioned. So Credo Global is a think tank, and at the heart of Credo Global is people. And Credo Global really is about empowering people, individuals, communities, whether they're children, whether they are young people, men or women, vulnerable groups, marginalized groups, forgotten communities. So we come alongside to empower them. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned about being launched in Berlin, and by did you say that it's part of the charity?
Yes, so let me explain that. So Newside International was registered in 1989.
Right, so the same year the Berlin Wall fell.
Very good, Bella, yes. So it was actually really meaningful and significant that we launched it in Berlin within the margins of the UNIGF at the anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Because that's what needs to happen. Walls need to come down. Walls of division, walls of hatred, walls of bitterness.
And that sort of ties into almost like the values and the
absolutely
ethos of what Credo Global is
absolutely about. Because the values and the ethos of who we are as Credo Global is primarily based on the Word of God, which is the Bible, and it is eternal, it is fresh, it is alive, it's sharper than a double-edged sword, it's real, it's more real than what we see with our naked eyes.
And even though it's faith-based, is it primarily only for those from the Christian faith?
No, it's not, and that's a very good question, Bella. In fact, we work closely with people and individuals whom we feel led to work with, whether they're Muslims, whether they're Buddhists, doesn't really matter what their affiliation is, as long as they share the same values as us in terms of having a heart for people, heart for development. So some of the things that we do within the think tank, we have capacity building initiatives, we have training and mentoring.
What do you mean by capacity-driven initiatives?
So before the startup think tank was launched, Rebecca Crosby and I, we have a combined experience of expertise in the areas that Credo Global is currently launching into. And so Rebecca's done trainings for Parliament here in the UK, the Welsh Parliament with the BBC, for instance. I've done training with organizations in Fiji and Samoa, and within Asia Pacific, public policy officials. We've had legislative framework and drafting experience, and in terms of innovation in the past, we've run initiatives like youth tech camps in a time where in the Pacific mobile apps were primarily brought in from Hong Kong or from India and that sort of thing. But we ran social experiments where children were able to build and develop apps alongside experienced coders.
I mean, it's great.
So things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's great also having that, because we're arming them with the tools for the time that they're growing up in.
Absolutely. We live in a information economy, and it's where borders are being reduced. We live in a global, borderless world, and to be able to be relevant, we have to be able to empower our children and our people and our communities with the equipment or with the knowledge or with the capacity to be functional, whether this is using ICT to leverage their businesses, or to leverage content, or to tell our stories, and that sort of thing. But quite aside from that, we also do things like public policy development, legislative framework and drafting, bespoke training and coaching, and trend analysis and future casting. So for instance, if there are issues that the Fijian communities face which are directly related to public policies by the council or by the UK government, then we can come alongside existing organizations currently do work in this area, in which some of the community members are a part of, to customize the approach in terms of the advocacy approach, which will require like trend analysis.
And also utilizing the network that you have in terms of access to certain spaces that
Absolutely.
individuals might not necessarily have access into.
Absolutely, and that's the power of collaboration, because isolated we are alone, but together we have synergy.
Right.
And often we like to encourage people to collaborate and to not to be afraid to draw from resources outside of themselves, outside of their communities, outside of what they're used to or what they're familiar with. You had asked me, Bella, how I got into this.
Yes, how did you, let's like go back to the beginning, the genesis of it all, if I must say. Have you always wanted to work in this field, in this sector? Is it something that's you've always been interested in?
So ever since I was a kid, you know how you grow up in Fiji, you go to Sunday school and youth groups, right? And well, I've always been taught that I was a part of something that was always bigger than myself, and which is primarily people. And my father has had a huge influence in terms of my love for people. And I can remember very early on as a kid visiting communities, visiting his friends, where he would literally share the gospel like on a Sunday afternoon, and I'm coming along just for free roti, you know.
Yeah.
Just kidding, although I did get the free roti too. But yeah, and I've always loved people. But growing up in Fiji and living through the different coup d'etats, like I've seen the systemic issues that affect the economy, that affect the cultural aspects of living in Fiji. Like there was a time I remember I never thought, there was a point in time I didn't know the difference between a Fijian, like a person of indigenous heritage, and a person of Indian heritage, until the coup happened. And then I realized, oh my God, there is a difference, you know, because as kids we're not taught race, we're not taught color. And so growing up, like seeing all these things, and as always a thinker, and I've always deeply thought about issues. And so my first involvement with the think tank was in 2011 when I set up Pacifica Nexus, and it was this year that I gave it away to Mr. Sunyela Kokina-Kembo, who is its new executive director. And Pacifica Nexus is a think tank that's incorporated out of Fiji. But in terms of my love for justice and that sort of thing, I was actually an engineering student, Bella.
Right.
Yeah, I was believe it or not, I was an engineering student. And
So what changed that?
yeah, so you know the coup the second coup happened, or should I say the third? Well, let's say the second coup happened.
2000.
The 2000 coup happened, and I remember I was swimming in the pool, coming out of the pool, the youth people, walking to 8th hall, when we heard gunshots. Boo, 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 poo. Sorry, sound effect.
Typical Fijian
Typical
storytelling.
Fijian storytelling sound effects. Yes. And yeah, there was immediate curfew, and we all got sent home. And then I had a hard rethink, and I was going through things in my life at the time, and I felt like, and the following year I felt like I needed to quit university. I wanted to quit university. I wanted to do something meaningful with my life, like join Youth with a Mission. Because I remember growing up in church and having a very being surrounded by missionaries, or going to mission camps and praying for missionaries, and hearing their stories always used to fascinate me. So I wanted to be a missionary. Not to mention, I'd made God a promise as a kid that if He took away my nightmares as a kid, I'd be a missionary. But I remember, no pressure. But I remember the elders in church, and this is Islamic gospel, by the way. Uncle Roger, my dad, and the other elders, they came around me and they said, we feel that you need to go and pray and ask God for clarity. We don't feel that you're called to go to missions to YWAM. We feel like you're called to have a trade, meaning like a profession, because there are lots of countries where they send missionaries to, which were not receiving missionaries without trade. And so I asked them, what trade? They said, well, go pray about it, sell and come back. So I went.
It is amazing that you have that spirit of obedience to be able to, and maturity to take that counsel and be able to accept it.
Yeah, it's very fortunate because my elders are like, they were my father and my uncles, like not physically related, but like I grew up trusting them. So when they spoke, I just listened, right?
Yeah.
So I went out 3 days. I went, prayed, and waited on God, and He gave me 2 scriptures. Don't ask me what books they're from. I can't remember exactly, but I can Google to look it up. But one of them said, "Seek justice for the oppressed, defend the fatherless and the widow." The second scripture that I got was when God was stopping Paul from going into Asia Minor, and He rerouted him. And the Holy Spirit warned him not to go into Asia Minor, and He said, "I've closed the doors to Asia, I've opened the doors to Europe."
And this, how many years ago was this?
That would have been in 2001. No, 2000. At the tail end of 2000, but the beginning of 2001.
So almost.
Actually, 2000.
So almost 20 years ago.
Oh God, yes. Yes. Oh Lord. Yeah. So the first one, when I took both the words to the elders, they said yes, it resounds with our spirit. So they laid hands on me and released me into the 2 prophetic words, and they sent me into it. So that's how I did law. I switched from engineering to law, and God just gave tremendous capacity and clarity to understand the complexities of law. He just made it really simple, put it that way. And I can't boast about it because it's a grace that God gave. Because when He calls, He equips. When He equips, He empowers, and He sends, right? So it's all God. So He takes the credit. Now the second prophetic word came to pass last year in Paris. It took 19 years.
And is it, I know it's taken 19 years, but is it something that you've sort of waited on, or did it, like when it happened, it reminded you of plans that you sort of set in motion when you changed to the law profession?
So I can't take credit for it, because I remember I'd just been diagnosed at the time with Hodgkin's. I just finished having 2 invasive surgeries, and in all honesty, I was ready to retire and wait to die, right? And so the thing that I went to Paris for was a UN meeting, and as a member of the multi-stakeholder advisory group at the time, and I was facilitating 2 main sessions, lost my luggage. And so here were 2 women who flew from Cardiff out of Wales. They were sent from Nissan International to come and meet me, and they brought clothes and a Bible. And at the time they came, I was in a state of I was going through a lot of trauma, confusion. In Fijian there's a word butubuturoa, I was just wild and reckless. But God in His mercy would send His people to come and minister to me. And as we sat in some random restaurant, it was kind of like Messi, the football player Messi, how he signed a contract on a serviette. As we sat across the table from each other, I felt like all the prophetic words spoken over my life as a kid just began to lock in the spirit in front of me. I saw it. I literally saw like bolts just zoom and just connect above my head. And that's how I knew that I can't explain it. I just knew I was supposed to be in United Kingdom in Wales. Don't ask me how, but it's just a knowing. In terms of the capacity to come, in all honesty, like I said, I was ready to retire, right?
Right.
I didn't have the financial means to come. I mean, I'm from Fiji, the bush, things are not easy.
Yeah.
Like I do work to pay the bills, and then I watch Netflix and relax, right? But God called, and within 6 months I was in Cardiff. And I've been a private patient, paying for my treatment. Thank God I've finished and completed my entire treatment.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and whilst I was completing my treatment, you see, God is really wise. He doesn't send the sickness, but He allowed it to happen so He could prophetically hijack my journey to change my trajectory to come here. Because there's no way Salah would have come on her own. You know what I mean? Volunteering. I love Fiji too much. I love my people. I mean, I travel all the time for work in the past, but to leave Fiji, no. But isn't it interesting that He had to give that word 20 years ago, so that 20 years later, the Salah then wouldn't be able to rationalize or to try to figure things out logically or to overthink it, but to trust that God had already spoken and that this was the manifestation. So when I came and I became part of the community here within the United Kingdom, I got prayed, prophesied over, counsel, built, mentored, nurtured, and I'm still being nurtured. But I began to understand my destiny and my purpose, and part of it is Credo Global and setting up the think tank. So like I said, it started with a word that God gave Paul Humberstone, and so we set it up, and ever since we've just been open to seeing how God builds it, and we
opens doors for you as well.
Yeah, it's opened doors for me. I mean, here I was thinking I was gonna retire, but God has other plans. So yeah, He's just so faithful. He's sovereign. He's amazing. Never left my side. And just to let you know, within the few, Rebecca Crosby, who's the managing director of Credo Global, she's a human development expert, been in the field for more than 30 years, working across Africa, South America, the US, the UK, and Europa. She's an incredible, amazing woman. She also runs the women's group within New Sight International, which is called Accord. So if you're on Facebook, feel free to follow Accord on Facebook. And Credo Global also is on Facebook, and you can follow it on Credo Global.
Right. So to sort of bring us back to what Credo Global is about, and in terms of like you mentioned, one thing you mentioned was the legislative framework and drafting, and the bespoke training and coaching, training and mentoring, public policy development even. How specifically for the Fijian community, what are some of the things that Credo Global would be able to help us with?
So one of the things we can do is we come alongside individuals, organizations, community groups, and depending on what the needs are. So for example, with individuals, we can facilitate incubating startups or business advisory services to help grow an idea into a business opportunity that is global. So to take something local and make it global, that's one. And the other thing is also empowerment for men, empowerment for women and children. We have all kinds of initiatives going, and if anyone wants to get in touch with us, they can leave a message on our Facebook, on Credo Global Facebook. And we also do trainings for executive committees, for communities, remember I had mentioned that we had launched it in Berlin 30 years after the Berlin Wall fell, right? So there are walls of division that exist from time to time, and sometimes those walls can surface from either differences in opinion or different methodologies, or whatever reasons, or discrimination and that sort of thing. But to get to where we need to go will require a level of collaboration and oneness that can't be concocted in the natural or artificially. It has to be something that's birthed in the spirit and infused with the word. And so for that to happen, walls need to come down, and walls of crisis in identity, disempowerment, mocking voices that try to tell us that we're inferior because we're from a tiny country, or we're inferior because we're black, or because our hair is not blonde, things like that. But to recognize that every person has value regardless of rank, status, occupation, that every person is significant, every person has potential, every person has a gift, and to come alongside the communities to be able to help them fulfill their God-given potential and destiny, and ultimately take us to the finish.
Oh, that's amazing. With Credo Global being predominantly based in Cardiff, if we were to access your assistance in sort of facilitating training for certain workshops that we'd like to do within our community, do we need to be in Cardiff?
No.
Like for those of us who live, because you understand how with the Fijian communities we're dotted, geographically all over the place, in England, in Scotland, and some camps in Wales as well. How do we come to you, or are you able to sort of facilitate these requests for assistance in areas where a majority of us might be able to go to?
The latter. So we're able to do both training in Cardiff and also go to where the needs are, if they're wherever they may be, whether it's Inverness or in York, wherever the majority would like to congregate, or where it's more attainable to facilitate the workshops. So that's something we're able to do, but all within means. And we have to be led to as well, to hear from God in terms of timing. But we're certainly open to coming alongside the community to facilitate this training, because it is the season to be free, and the season for every individual, every family, every community to touch the length, width, breadth, height, and depth of their God-given potential and activate it, so that not only will they feel empowered and be fully functional, full of purpose, full of meaning, but that the children are able to thrive, marriages are able to thrive, relationships restored and healed, and that people can and even in families where they might be struggling financially, struggling to make ends meet, coming alongside to identify innovation, potential for innovation, potential to activate giftings, to bring revenue and that sort of thing, so that they're empowered.
Oh, that's amazing. So is there anything else that you'd like to add to this, that you'd like the community to know about, or just something that
parting words?
Yes.
Thank you, Bella. So my parting words to you would be this: if you forget everything I said so far, that you'll remember this, that you are special, and you are on God's mind 24/7. In fact, if you read Psalms 139, you will see that it says in His word that He knows every hair on your head. He knows every tear that you've cried. He knows when you stand, when you sit. And there's no place you can go where you can hide. There's a scripture that says, even if I were to hide under the cloud of darkness, but still you'd be there. And so you are significant to God, and because you're significant to God, you matter. And so in Credo Global, one of our the philosophies that we embed deeply within the core of our organization is #people first, because you matter.
Thank you so much, Sala, for coming onto our podcast today. It's been enlightening, and I've really enjoyed being able to speak to you, both on the podcast and off as well, with regards to your work that you're doing here. And I really hope that we continue to have these conversations. For those of you who would like to get in touch, Sala, would you like to share ways that they can get in touch with you with regards to social media handles or email addresses?
Certainly. So our website is www.credoglobal.org.
Credo is
CREDOGLOBAL.org. So credoglobal.org. And on Facebook, you can find us. We're Credo Global. So that's 2 words, Credo, 1 word, second word, Global. We're also on Instagram as Global Credo. But I'm sure everyone's on Facebook. So if you add us on Facebook and send us a message, we'd love to hear from you.
No project is too small.
Yeah, there's no project that's too small or too big. You matter. So just get in touch and
Thank you again for joining us, and looking forward to sharing another podcast with you in the future. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us for this podcast. It's been great having you all here and hearing from Sala, as mentioned. If you'd like more information on what we've shared about on this podcast or any of the previous podcasts, feel free to contact me through social media on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can search for me on the social media handles Fijian in the UK. You could email me on fijianintheuk@gmail.com, or also you could subscribe and share this content with your friends and family. Nakavakalevu, and I hope to have you back for our next podcast.